from Lesotho. I established Rare Disease Lesotho Association, NGO, in 2017 and has been running since. I'm also a Ehlers-Danlos syndrome patient. I have struggled for years to get my diagnosis, and this is where my discrimination started. When you're not diagnosed, the chances of you being discriminated against in society by the medical professionals and everything else around you are high, especially if you have invisible rare disease, because most of our symptoms are not necessarily seen and you can only feel the pain yourself, and tests usually come back negative. And for most people, such as myself, it will take you then multiple years just to get your diagnosis, especially being from a third world country, of which even basic, well, normal medical conditions don't always have the right materials to help those living with them. And they have to sort it out elsewhere. Like most of our patients need to go to South Africa for their treatments, and that is another problem on its own. So with that said, we as rare disease warriors face a lot of discrimination, especially being a woman. There's already an unfortunate discrimination for just being a woman and people taking you seriously. Now, being a woman living with a rare condition, it is so much tougher for you to use your voice and be vocal. And I remember one day my mom was telling me to listen to the doctors and just take whatever they bring in. And this was way before I got diagnosed, and I could tell that they were doing something wrong and they were not giving me the attention I needed. And I spoke up, and I remember telling my mom, if I do not speak up and voice out, I am going to die on this bed. And no one else will feel like they're responsible for my life once I die, because I would have kept quiet and not done anything about it. And there's so many people out there who are voiceless and don't have the capacity or the knowledge to speak up for themselves. And this is when I realized how much, as a woman, a very young woman at that, why and how we're very discriminated against. And 2020 got worse when now Corona came up and nobody cared about it. Well, in the medical facilities, if it wasn't about COVID, no one paid attention to any other kind of patient. And that was so unfortunate, because rare condition patients couldn't then travel from Lesotho to South Africa for their appointments, which made it really hard. As we speak now, I have patients within the association who only this year have went to a checkup in 2 years. And that, just to say, for those who don't have access to things, may have not actually seen doctors in 2 years, which is not right.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of estimated nearly 2 million women and girls with bleeding diseases globally. My name is Baib Ziemel. I'm a passionate patient advocate from Latvia. I am a woman with a bleeding disorder. I was born with von Willebrand disease. It expresses similarly to hemophilia with various bleeding episodes in the skin, internal organs, joints, and muscles. I'm saying estimated 2 million because majority of women with bleeding disorders are not yet diagnosed. Out of nearly 350,000 people with bleeding disorders identified globally, only 24% are women and girls. For each man suffering with hemophilia, 1.5 women should be diagnosed with hemophilia. But out of all registered people with hemophilia, only 5% are women. Few years ago, scientists agreed that anyone who has less than 40% factor level in their blood should be diagnosed with bleeding disorder. Until that, only men could have proper diagnosis and women were considered only carriers. Delay for women's diagnosis is between 8 and 16 years, resulting in limited evidence of how bleeding disorders really affect women and girls daily. Lack of recognition leads to lack of treatment, and also adding to the stigma and various cultural, social, and medical problems for marriage and having children. While we take care of our sons, brothers, and fathers, many of us suffer monthly with no medical help or even die from excessive bleed during or after childbirth. Approximately 1 in 5 women who presents to a gynecologist with heavy menstrual bleeding has an underlying bleeding disorder. but often remains undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. Many of us choose not to have children due to fear of passing on the gene or risk of dying from a bleed. Excessive bleeding during menstruations leaves many of us at the risk of period poverty because we can't afford enough hygiene products. Many of us feel too sick from this burden. We live with anemia and depression. We can't go to work and school. The gender inequality in our community is huge and we can't tackle it alone. On one hand, COVID-19 pandemics helped us to become more connected as community, sparkling more conversations and sharing knowledge and experiences online. We had two successful global summits for women and girls with bleeding disorders, helping to reach those people who would not otherwise be able to attend conferences. But on the other hand, it also hit hard on the access to already limited medical help. In many places, specialist care and various medical services were stopped. We need to harmonize and improve diagnostic possibilities and access to treatment globally. But the first step is recognition of our issues and the fact that women bleed too. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Adrian Fisher. I'm an academic at the University of Cambridge and I run a programme around the advocating support for rare disease families. My backdrop is I'm a parent of 4 children and one of whom is quite rare, and his condition was actually discovered through a screening programme, genetic screening programme that was actually carried out in Cambridge. And my involvement in this panel, which is a fantastic opportunity, I think, is highlighting some of the gender equalities that we've come across in our sort of education programs that we've been running around rare diseases and advocating at the same time. And it became really clear very quickly once we had George, our youngest child, that there was a difference in behaviour between if I took George out into the community and my wife took George out, George's mum took George out into the community. And it was quite stark, actually. Gilda would experience quite a lot of snide, unpleasant comments, whereas people would be relatively normal, in inverted commas, with me. So we even at a very early stage, we saw some cases of Gilda being treated quite differently to myself. And as that grew, we were one of these families that sort of ended up as a sort of internet story. My youngest lost a cuddly toy, and there was this big search, and it became a really large story across a lot of the media and the rest of it. And we had this lovely outpouring of kindness, with lots of toys and lots of gifts coming to George. But we also had, of course, the other side of that on the social media platforms, and a few individuals that were perhaps less kind, and some were saying that the kid, he should be killed, must be killed because he's different, and the mother should be sterilised, and these are quite shocking. And I remember Gilda's reaction to those being really quite horrified, and it was interesting to see that brazen sort of discrimination that seems to be embedded in people's reactions to children with rare diseases and of course more broadly as well. So it'd be fantastic. I'm looking forward to finding out more about what other panelists have experienced and general discussion. In terms of the COVID sort of a situation, we were I think we found that things have generally deteriorated. There's less tolerance in the community and more unfriendly comments coming back at children broadly with rare diseases. And for us, it's more about trying to bring forward education and promote social inclusion broadly across genders and everything. So that's really where we're coming from today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Un paciente con enfermedad rara en América Latina y en todo el mundo necesita tener acceso a un diagnóstico. antes que el diagnóstico, incluso al tamizaje neonatal, de preferencia ampliado, que pueda captar esas enfermedades incluso antes de tener los síntomas. No solo debemos focalizarnos en el tamizaje neonatal o en el diagnóstico o en el tratamiento de los pacientes. Tendríamos que focalizarnos en prevenir las enfermedades poco frecuentes con una consejería genética, con educación a la población que pueda evitar que podamos tener más casos que podrían ser manejados de otra forma. En América Latina no estamos ajenos de todas las necesidades que tienen los pacientes con enfermedades raras. En Perú, por ejemplo, tenemos la ley que declara de interés nacional y preferente la atención de los pacientes con enfermedades raras. Sin embargo, a casi 10 años de su promulgación, todavía no hemos implementado la ley y todavía los pacientes no están teniendo acceso a diagnóstico y a tratamiento. Cabe resaltar que todas las enfermedades raras no tienen tratamiento, entonces se necesita mucha investigación para poder hacer que las enfermedades raras puedan tener un tratamiento y que puedan evitar que los pacientes lleguen a la muerte o se discapaciten. En el caso de las mujeres, lo que nosotros hemos observado es que mayormente, cerca del 99% de los cuidadores son mujeres. Por lo tanto, necesitan un soporte especial porque van a tener que dejar de trabajar en la mayoría de casos para poder atender a sus niños con enfermedad rara. Los gobiernos deberían atender esta necesidad, presentar programas de subsidios, por ejemplo, para hacer que estas madres puedan atender con la tranquilidad y con toda la plenitud a ese niño o a esa niña que padece enfermedad poco frecuente. En el caso de las mujeres padeciendo enfermedades poco frecuentes, lo que hemos observado es que ellas reportan tener mayor dificultad para estudiar, para poder estudiar una profesión o para incluso ejercer una carrera. Por lo tanto, el grupo de mujeres es vulnerado y no incluido a todos los sentidos en este tema tan importante. Creemos que tiene que haber una política nacional específica, transversal, para apoyo a todas las mujeres y sobre todo apoyar a aquellas mujeres que están padeciendo de alguna enfermedad y de alguna enfermedad rara en especial, porque tiene todo un trasfondo mayor, ¿no? La enfermedad rara puede demorar hasta 8 años de media en ser diagnosticada y esto ocasiona un grave perjuicio en la salud de la paciente y del paciente y por lo tanto necesita tener un tratamiento específico para ello y mejorar y brindar todo el acceso necesario.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Marshme Matsudi from the Department of Molecular and Human Genetics, Banaras Hindu University. My research interest includes identification of causal variants for rare disorders, particularly motor neuron disorders and congenital ocular disorder. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, they have formulated a national policy for treatment of rare disorders in 2017. And more recently, this policy was updated, that is in 2021. In the field of rare disorder, as all of us know, it's very complex and heterogeneous. And what happens is, other than a few handful of rare disease, the understanding of the pathogenesis is still at its infancy. In the Indian scenario, unfortunately, the data on rare disease is lacking, and thus this impedes our understanding of the burden of rare disease in our country. All around the globe, we come across discrimination. Children affected by rare disorders, they have a Herculean task to be integrated into the regular schooling system. They have to face obstacles at each and every step of their education. Social inclusion is also a problem for people who are affected by rare disease. And in addition, families and persons living with rare disease face challenge in maintaining decent work, and have a greater risk for hardship due to the increased cost of care for a child with rare disease. Women, in addition, experience gender inequality and stigma as persons living with rare disease. Addressing the challenges of persons living with a rare disease, in the General Assembly recently, they have recalled the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. We as individuals as well as a society are deeply concerned that the coronavirus pandemic disease, that is COVID-19 pandemic, has enhanced the existing inequalities, and those at particular risk are women and girls, and they are in an increased vulnerable situation. We urgently need to eliminate the barriers preventing participation of individuals affected with rare disease in every walk of life. For people with rare disorders, equity relates to opportunity, non-discrimination in education, at work, equitable access to healthcare, and finally, social acceptance.